Welcome to our podcast episode focusing on the future of AI in GMP and Pharma. Today we have a distinguished guest joining us, Fabrizio Maniglio, an experienced QA leader with a passion for IT systems and a strong background in quality and supply chain management within the life sciences sector. Currently serving as the Industry Business Development Director at Honeywell, Fabrizio brings over 15 years of hands-on experience to the table. His expertise and insights into the transformative impact of AI in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries promise to make these episodes both enlightening and engaging. Fabrizio, welcome to the podcast. I hope you're well and excited to be here.
Thanks for having me, Jan.
Great. So we did so many things already together. We ran webinars, and you are a great speaker. Your webinars are amazing, informative, and highly engaging. So I recommend to anybody to not miss a podcast by you. And really happy to have you on the show when we can chat one-on-one. And I was curious to hear about your career. So you worked many years in the pharmaceutical sector, in the quality, and then you shifted to a role of a business developer at Honeywell, which is a EQMS system. And it's very interesting to hear how this career shift happened to you and how your role in QA helped you with this.
Yeah. So if I start at the very beginning, I'm a microbiologist by trade. So I studied microbiology, and then I started off my career in a lab setting. I started working in a quality control lab doing method validation, and then from there rather quickly moved on to the dark side of quality, if you like, and joined quality assurance. And within quality assurance, I did quite a lot of different roles. I was a deviation writer at first in a deviation management team. I then took over the team. I worked in quality systems for a while. And all the while when I was working in quality, I always had this flair and this draw for technology and for software and for how that can be leveraged to make our lives easier at that time using the tools that I had at my disposal. Now, from there, I then went to manage a site for a while. I used to do audits and inspections as well, running back and front rooms. And also there, always trying to find new solutions and technological solutions to problems. And about 7 years ago, I was involved, or 8 years ago still, in the life sciences around computer systems validation. I was doing data integrity. Back then was just came up with a lot of different regulations. So I started doing data integrity and data and how to best ensure that the systems are maintaining data integrity. And from there, I just got the opportunity to join a quality management organization that not only was helping one organization, but I had the opportunity to then help many organizations solve problems through technology. So that's what I started doing. And initially, I didn't directly start in industry and business development. I was a solutions engineer for a while. And solutions engineering means taking the solutions that I had and understanding the problems and bringing the two together to solve problems and to deliver better outcomes. So that's what I did for about 5 years. And then about 1.5, 2 years ago, I joined the industry and business development team. And now I'm in this privileged position where I can dream a little bit more about the future and what the future might bring and where the industry should be going and help influence and drive change within the industry. I hope that covers a little bit all of the bases.
A bit. I think there are a lot of background there that one can discuss. So it's very interesting that one of the webinars as well as we did together was about digitalization, and you gave a lot of example, of dreaming on what what the future can be for the natural sciences. So can you give some examples of what in your role as a business development director, right? So you probably also have contact with a lot of companies that you serve or different partners who you can work together because there are a lot of synergies. And can you give example to some of such dreams that you are have been realized, or you think they will be in the future, and how they impact the industry, for example?
Yeah, so one thing I should preface everything with that I forgot. Yes, I'm an industry and business development director at Honeywell. However, today I'm here as Fabrizio Maniglio. So anything I say in this conversation represents my opinions only, and not necessarily represents or aligns with the opinions of Honeywell. But so a lot of the things that I see are trying to solve problems with efficiency and effectiveness at the very early stages when we talk to customers. But more than that, what I try to do is push the industry forward of thinking about the new problems that we can start tackling, thinking about how technology has changed the way that we can potentially approach problems, and also to move into a place where maybe we go back and think, why are we doing the things the way that we're doing them? What is the outcome that we're looking for? And find better ways of solving those problems. So that's the majority of the discussions that I'm having with customers and with industry colleagues of mine is really around the notion of what outcomes are we looking for? Why are we doing things a certain way? And are there better ways or different ways or now new ways to solve problems, or maybe solve problems that were not solvable before?
Right. And maybe we can also separate the discussion maybe between what is and what will be.
Yeah.
So we all seen a lot of advancement in digitalization in the pharma sector, and now we have this AI boom, especially with the large language models that are just booming everywhere, and a lot of there are a lot of discussion on using it in the pharma sector, but then there are a lot of regulations that are being discussed now in terms of data security and um, data privacy and so on, and maybe other tools as well. So if we are talking about what can you tell us about the industry now, in the how it developed in the last several years, and what solutions are there that are, I don't know if we can say it mind blowing, but they have completely changed the way we are doing things?
I think that solutions that will completely change the way that we're doing things are yet to come. There are, especially in our industry, and you hinted a little bit about that though there are all these amazing advancements with the technology that we have at our disposal, I think that our industry is always, or has never really been the industry that jumps at the opportunity to be first. They always sit back and wait and see how things are developing a little bit and figure out how can we use these in a compliant way. But to answer your question around the status quo, I think when it comes to digitalization, you'd be surprised to see how many companies still are not fully digital. So there's still a lot of manual and paper processes. That's definitely something that I was surprised with when I started having more conversations with a variety of different businesses, that there's still a lot of manual processes. And even if you go beyond having manual processes, there's still a lot of silos and not connected of data. And I think that these are the things that we're starting to see is the notion that one system can do it all, I think, has gone out the window a little bit. And the acceptance, especially in recent conversations I had, was, well, we will always have multiple systems doing multiple things. But now what is going to happen is we'll start trying to connect those systems in meaningful ways to do more with the data that is generated, or even bring more of the processes in a digital nature online so that they can be connected. Because that's ultimately the first step, is being able to have data in a digital way. Then the second step would be to connect the data in meaningful ways so that you can connect and start to understand. And there is an tech graphic that I often reference, where you have these different steps that you go through in your digitalization journey, where after connecting your journey starts, and you start seeing what is happening because you have all those data points. And when you see what's happening, you can then connect it to, well, I understand why things are happening because I see them, I know the data behind it. And understanding then leads to causality. So you can understand why things are happening. The next step is, well, if I know why things are happening, I can see where things are going. Now I can start predicting. And ultimately, after prediction, if you can predict and you have dynamic enough systems that are connected, you end up in being adaptive. So you can adapt and maybe even prevent things from happening in the first place through that process. So I think that that's where we currently are. And there is a lot of exciting new things in the future, but I suspect that that's going to be a separate section of our conversation where we talk a little bit more about what's coming next.
Right. So I think AI has been used a lot, especially in research, right? Because in research there are not a lot of red tapes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's been used already to detect molecules that can be used as pharmaceutical entities, and it's much easier to do. But how to use it in the pharma, it is a bit more complex because there are a lot of red tapes, and the question what you can actually do. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I was thinking about ChatGPT and everything that you can do, there are so many applications from what I can just think about as assistance in um, analyzing deviations and helping with risk management and risk analysis and root cause analysis, as even if it doesn't do it for you, which is amazingly it can if you give it the data, it can also serve as a guide or a consultant that sits with you and just guides you through the process. And I think that can be quite a breakthrough there. And I see um, solutions in the business sector and marketing sector that are like mushrooms popping, but in pharma we still don't see much of it. So do you think this is something that is viable, that it can happen, and will it be happening soon that you will see AI assistance?
So yes and no. I think I'll take it back to your first question of AI and the application of AI, and I would caution to put all the terms in one basket because AI is not equal to AI. And I think your question ended up in Gen AI, which is the chatbots and the generative artificial intelligence. But the reality is, artificial intelligence is a much wider field than just generative artificial intelligence, and there are quite a lot of applications that are already being used even further downstream of the manufacturing process in the pharmaceutical world, for example. So if you think of categorization of things, if you think of looking for similarities in a data set, all of those things are already there and are already being used within the GXP regulated space because it allows to augment human decision making. So that's where I would draw. And those are not necessarily generative artificial intelligence. They would fall more into the category of machine learning, where the algorithm is still trained, but it's not generating new information. It's just helping you to categorize or helping to determine if something's similar. But those are all use cases that augment human decision making. And I think that that's one of the solutions when we start thinking about how to deploy this in a regulated space is, well, first look for low stake environments where you have things that are always going to have a human in the loop in this context. And the human in the loop meaning someone that can check. Because for creative tasks, if coming back to ChatGPT or just generally generative intelligence, that can be very helpful to help you brainstorm or to help you get started. And then you're still the final reviewer that makes sure that it actually makes sense and there is still this human in the loop. And the other consideration is always going to be, yes, they are not, or artificial intelligence is not perfect, maybe not perfect yet, but I would also always advise to make sure that you know what you compare it with, right? Because neither are we. We are not perfect. Humans make mistakes. And a lot of times when we're trying to replace a human task with a system, we're aiming for perfection and we're expecting that it's 100% accurate. But oftentimes, if we compare it to let's say the worst possible employee that you may have and his performance, then if it's better, then on average that may be better for you in the specific task, or maybe not. But I think those are nuanced distinctions that need to happen when we're talking about, is it viable in the GXP environment.
Right. So I think there are a lot of consideration there. So first of all, we have the validation. So I think that taking something like like ChatGPT, for example, like that, it outputs data, and in terms of validation, you cannot actually validate it because each time the data you will get will be different, right? So you will always need somebody to check it, because you can see when you play with ChatGPT and you ask the same question, you will get each time a bit a different result. So that's why it probably cannot be completely validated to a complete GMP use, because they also have the problem of hallucination effect, that they just, if they don't know the answer, they just invent something, and as if it's true, right?
Sometimes, yes. But I would also say that, so the example you made with validation is always the question. So can you validate it? You cannot validate that it reproducibly creates the exact same response time over time, but that may not be the requirement. So it's always the question, what are we validating for and what's the intended use? But the wider question, this is a topic that I started asking myself, is validation even the right tool set to look at this? Because again, I often say that almost counterintuitively, ChatGPT or large language models in general may be the most human technology that we have introduced in a while. Not in a sense that it is aiming to replace humans, but it is human in a way that allows for natural language, allows for variability in responses, which we see if we ask 3 employees the same thing, we'll get slightly different responses that are grounded in the training that they did. So I started thinking about this concept of maybe validation may not be the right way of thinking about it, but treating it almost like an employee. So how would you go about treating an employee? If you have a position to fill, you would go and look in the marketplace and would make sure that the CVs and the certifications that the candidate brings with him are meeting the requirements that you have for the job. So you can do the same with AI. You can say, okay, does this model meet my requirements? Is it secure enough? Where is the data stored? You do your due diligence. And then when you decide to hire an employee, then you go for onboarding. So that could be the grounding and the fine tuning of a model. And so you teach it almost like, okay, I know that you can roughly do critical thinking and you can do this job. And now I'm going to train you how we in our organization do this job. So you go through a training exercise. And then from there, you still don't expect the employee to be perfect, but you put downstream controls in place to catch any mistakes. And I would treat generative artificial intelligence much akin an employee, to say, put downstream humans in the loop to make sure that if errors were to happen, you still catch them. And ideally, the system is still giving you more accurate outputs than a human would be. So the reviewers will have to catch less and less mistakes down the line.
Right. So that's an interesting point to look at it, and it makes also quite a lot of sense. So I think when you're saying, okay, we need another evaluation tool and not per se validated, so I think probably the risk assessment would be the right, a better tool to assess this. And I think this is where also the FDA is heading, because it steps back from this way of validation as it was before, and it wants to move more uh, uh, into risk management validation type, where it's more you assess the risks, and you need to do just a huge report on something that you didn't evaluate correctly, or you just sometimes testing for things that are irrelevant, just to add some pages to the report, right? So it all depends on the use requirements, what you want to achieve, and what it can do, and what are the mistakes or the issues, and how we can catch them, and what is the impact of such mistakes on our manufacturing, right?
Yeah, that's very crucial, and what you're mentioning. So I think you were hinting at computer system assurance rather than validation, right? As,
Yes,
as a
exactly.
word. But you raise an interesting point that um, you should always have a risk assessment and understanding of what's the intended purpose and what's the risk of it being used for this, because there is a huge difference, for example, to use artificial intelligence to generate a draft audit plan, for example, so that the auditor doesn't have to start from scratch, and then he still takes that audit plan and refines it and then goes and performs the audit. That's a very low risk implication or application of an artificial intelligence, because even if the things are not 100% accurate, even if, to your point, it may hallucinate a little bit, there's still a human that takes that as a starting point and then makes sure that it makes sense for the audit that the auditor is going to go perform. So that's a completely different use case to saying, oh, I'm going to deploy an artificial intelligence that will release my batches for me without any oversight. So that's a completely different realm and a completely different beast that will require a whole lot of oversight in a different way and a lot of assurances to make sure that you can actually trust it. And I think we're a little bit further away from the second point, but the first point is very feasible already now, I believe.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely on that. And you mentioned before that the issue that a lot of companies are facing, or not the issue, but something that I also feel that sets everybody in the manufacturing and the approvers back,
Mhm.
is the use of multiple systems which are not connected to each other. So I've seen it as well during my work, where of course you have the lean system, sometimes you have the QMS, sometimes you do validation of systems in a completely other software. Sometimes the SOPs are also completely not connected. It can be also the deviation, and which are not connected also to the QMS or the batch release, etc., etc., etc. Right? And you mentioned that the future that they, or the thing that is the easiest to solve, might be connecting everything together, right? And how do you see this happening? I'm sure that also. So I know that you we said that we will not uh, speak on behalf of Honeywell, but you probably, when you work through Honeywell, there are use requirements that you see, and you probably tackle those problems a lot, that companies want to connect their limbs, let's say to Honeywell, and but then the limb system should have open API or different tools that it allows you and gives you the permission to connect to it. So how do you see this issue being solved or tackled, or what are the issues that are there in this
So
regard?
I would probably start by saying most modern systems have, in one way, shape, or form, the ability to have APIs connect outwards to other systems. So I don't see that necessarily as a limiting factor. Of course, there is also still a surprising amount of homegrown systems that were built in-house. This situation there may be slightly different. I don't think it's necessarily a technology challenge of saying it's hard to connect one system to the other. That may be straightforward. We have been doing integrations for a long time. I think that the idea of data lakes, for example, exists also for a very long time, and putting all the data in one place so that you can then start figuring out what to do. I think where we've started to kind of change a little bit the way that we're thinking about that is oftentimes having all the data in one place just ends up having a data lake turn into a data swamp, so to speak, and then you don't really know what to do with the data. So oftentimes it's better not to think about the how of connecting systems, but start with the outcome in mind. So I would always recommend, instead of asking, can we connect two systems, to ask the question, what are we trying to achieve? What is the outcome we're looking for? And maybe in your case, it's connecting limbs with a QMS. And in that case, you are but the connection is just a means to get the data connected in a way to get you a certain outcome. So I would always start with the outcome in mind and say, okay, what are the outcomes we want to deliver? And then how we get there, that's a thing that is to be figured out. And often what we are starting to do more and more is go into the realm of having data pulled from systems at the time that it needs to be, so that you have the right time, right data in front of the right people at the right time, in the right format, so that the decisions can be taken.
Right. So I think that's a very important point. Data swamp, right? So you gather a lot of the information, but the question is, who looks through it, and what is the purpose, and why? So I think that having a lot of data and structuring it and understanding what can help you, I think that a lot of companies don't work with quality dashboards, for example. They have no idea. Even quality heads in some companies, I think, have no idea uh, how many deviations, how many repeating deviations they have per year, right?
Mhm.
If you ask them that, they will probably, oh, you know what, I need to go to some Excel, start counting. And the same for change control. It's not always being monitored, or issues with suppliers. So I think a lot of those things can be easily solved with dashboards. But also, if we are talking about AI, right? So if you teach AI to sort through the right data for you, let's say even predictive AI that can say, you know what, we are seeing, we are catching some anomalies that it predicts that it will result in a deviation in, if you in 5 batches you will have a malfunction in the system or something like this. Do you think it's something that, so I know that some companies already like
Mhm.
working in this, especially in maintenance and tools, but what is your perspective in general on quality in the different direction it can be used?
So if I reframe the question, you're asking about predictive capabilities, right? So you make the case of predictive maintenance. I think that's something that
Right. So different uses of like we have the data. So what different uses we can do? So predictive can be one thing that I'm thinking about, like a plot, doing dashboards. But I think the most interesting thing is actually because our topic is more AI. So I
Mhm.
think that it would be interesting to touch upon.
Yes,
What we
absolutely.
can do.
So I think prediction. I mean, prediction doesn't necessarily require AI. And I had this conversation already a couple of times where the objection basically is we have been doing predictions for a long time. You can do multivariate analysis. You can look at data. It's basically statistics, and then you draw your prediction. And that's true. Prediction requires data, and also to your point, I think we require data to be connected in certain ways. Back to the framework of you need to have the ability to understand why things are happening and why things are connected to
Right.
one another.
Right. But is it a manual process? Like you were saying, okay, we can do it. It's statistics, but but the question is it so far a manual process, or are there already systems which you're saying there is the statistics runs in the background, and then there is a red light that lights up when something is not right.
I think it has been more manual than it needs to be now, and it's definitely become easier with using artificial intelligence to solve certain of those problems. I think the interesting part with statistics or predictions with AI comes not necessarily from the prediction, which again you could probably do already, though it may have been more manual and cumbersome. With AI, that becomes more easy. I think the new concept that has come up is now emergence of insights. So with enough information, a model can surface insights that you didn't think of. So the problem with normal predictions would have been that you need to know what you're predicting for. So you need to understand, okay, I want to know when this is going to fail, and I know all these data points tell me when it's going to fail, and that will help me to predict based on the data points where I'm going. The interesting part with emergence is that you will have new insights or things that you didn't know that are now shown to you as potential things that you want to take into account. And I think that becomes very interesting when we go into development. The other thing that is happening is almost on this curve where initially we have like normal artificial intelligence with machine learning. So we talked about categorizing things or finding similar things. But then from there, we move on to Gen AI, which we are talking about now, which is able to generate. And then we now talked about prediction, which is the next step of, okay, we can predict, things start to emerge. And the next point after prediction, I think, is going to be the ability to have potentially autonomous agents, autonomous systems that can do many more things together. And the jump from there, from the one to the other, is the notion that not only can things emerge, but you can now train models or start being predictive with things that can be taught. So the notion there, or the difference is with systems that you can say, okay, I can train the system to react to situations I'm already aware of. But with a person or an employee, you train them in the rules of the game, and then that person will be likely be able to manage any situation, even if it's a net new situation. And that's going to come when things and systems can be taught, and when systems based on data can start implicitly learn what the rules are. I think those are two quite game-changing things.
Right. So I agree with you on that. So that will be quite interesting to see emerging in pharma indeed. And you mentioned it yourself, right? That the pharma is usually, especially maybe not the pharma as a whole, because I think the commercial sector is very digitalized. So I think it's more the manufacturing part that is
Yeah.
always lagging behind, and it's clear. It's especially because the issue with the validation and the regulations and the difficulty to implement new system. So do you think this is one of the reasons why a lot of innovative companies stay away from pharma? Do you see it like changing where more companies start bringing those solutions to pharma and taking the risks?
I hope so. So I'm a hopeless idealist at times. So I hope that that's where we're going. I suspect that the pharma industry may be ripe for what I tend to refer to as almost like a Kodak moment of, if you don't hop on board and if you don't figure these out, then you'll become obsolete in time. And I believe that because now is the time to understand and figure out how to use these systems. I also believe that there will be a point of no return where no matter how much you try starting from a certain point in time, you will never be able to catch up with companies that have already figured out how to use these tools. I also hope that the industry as a whole realizes that it's up to us to actually drive this change. And oftentimes, what I see in our industry is a reluctance to move and to wait for regulators to figure these things out. Now, sometimes that may work, but regulators and regulations and legislature doesn't move that quickly. It's often a cumbersome and slow process. Whereas the technology that we are talking about now moves very, very quickly. So I think it's unrealistic for us to expect that we will have a regulatory framework that we can follow blindly, just say, okay, just do this and this and this, and then using AI is going to be fine, or use these systems and you're going to be fine. It's for us to justify what is okay and what is not, in what use cases. And there, I think there is huge potential. The other thing that I kind of always want to mention is the reason why I'm so excited and passionate about certain artificial intelligence models that do certain things is, oh, it generates a picture, it generates a video, it can generate music. The reason why all of the industry should pay attention to that is because it's not what it does, it's the technology that is behind it that is interesting to understand. Because we're seeing all of these models pop up where data is readily available for developers to use to train their models. And just imagine the same capabilities applied to a data set that is specific to the life sciences. Maybe you apply it to your distribution network, and then it learns how your distribution works and is able to simulate that. Those are very interesting use cases that I see the future holding for us if we actually embark on this journey together.
And do you think those kind of ideas should usually they come from the companies themselves that or different entrepreneurs that see the need in it and then try it out, or should it come from certain companies that we know that big companies, as you mentioned, they build the systems around their manufacturing, and from one side it's making it harder right now to to switch, but on the other hand they were the first ones to digitize. So what do you think, should the push come from the industry where companies should think, okay, what we need, and then try to find companies, partner with them and just build the tools, or should more entrepreneurs who serve the pharma be more open-minded and uh, try out different solutions?
So I think that there's multiple aspects to your question that I would like to address. On one side, I think the trying to understand the technologies and playing around with it and applying it again in low stakes scenarios within your organization is probably a good thing to do now on your own without looking outside for finding people to do things with initially, because that helps you to understand what the technology is capable of. Now, at the same time, I'm not advertising to just become an IT company, because usually all the companies in the life science have a very clear mission around bettering patient outcomes and patient safety, and they should be focusing on that. But the reason why education and understanding of capabilities is so important, because that's where innovation comes from, is understanding what is possible and then being able to apply it to your world. So if you know, for example, that a system with enough training data is able to implicitly learn how things work, then maybe you say, okay, what if I were to apply this to my manufacturing data? And with that, you could then say, okay, if I apply this to my manufacturing data, then I would be able to simulate and predict what happens with my manufacturing data, and I would be able to ask questions, and that will help me in this and this way. So it's up to the industry and the individuals to come up with use cases, and then it's up to partners and software companies to then help develop those solutions together.
So do you see a lot of enthusiasm among your peers and colleagues who are either directors of technology or systems in the pharma, or your peers who are also business developer directors at various service providers? So do you see the rush and the excitement as well in other people in the industry?
I mean, you tend to natively surround yourself with people that have a similar predisposition. So I guess the easy answer is yes, there is a lot of enthusiasm. I think there is a lot of hype around artificial intelligence in general, coming top down from management, because it has been quite visible, and there is a lot of pressure and push to implement artificial intelligence around a variety of different organizations. Now, that can be good because it can fuel innovation, can also be dangerous because, as I always try to advertise, artificial intelligence is just yet another tool that we can use to solve problems and deliver outcomes. So it shouldn't be mistaken with a silver bullet that does everything for us, and it shouldn't be just you. So you shouldn't do AI for the sake of doing AI. You should have, again, back to having an outcome in mind. I think it's important to have an outcome in mind and say, trying to achieve this, and then maybe AI is one part of that solution. Maybe it's the whole solution, but maybe there is other ways of achieving that that don't require AI. But I think there is a lot of excitement about the possibilities and the art of the possible of where we can go to if we are leveraging those technologies efficiently.
And you mentioned that you surround yourself with the right people who are visionary, and they are hopefully also dreamers as well, because they want more for the industry. So how do you keep up with the trends? What are your sources to keep up with the trends. If somebody also wants in the industry to pick up on this AI trend and see what types of AIs are there, because we all hear about generative language models, but there are so much more, as you said. So what do you like to, are there conferences, blogs? Is this something you can share?
So so in a shameless self promotion, just follow me, and potentially I can help you with keeping up with the news. But of course, if you want to do it on your own, what I do a lot is I have a few newsletters I subscribe to that I trust. I go to Twitter or X for some information. I also have a little news aggregation tool that helps me to kind of sort through and sift through information and find information out. There is also a lot of free tools if you just want to learn the basics of artificial intelligence, machine learning, or just generally data science. There's quite a lot of free tools out there that prominent companies have put out there. There's some free courses by Google, for example, or Microsoft that just offer to give you an idea of what this is all about. There's plenty of courses on prompt engineering if you want to figure that out. And then I also get a lot of inspiration and information from, again, the group of colleagues that I've surrounded myself in and around LinkedIn. That's also a good source of information at times, where you find quite a lot of good articles. Also, always with kind of the viewpoint of this is somehow relevant to business and not just fun. So those are a few things that I do, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions if someone wants to reach out to me directly. It's like, how do you solve this? I'm happy to share my experience. But the reality is also, if I'm completely honest, it's a little bit of a struggle still, because there is so much information. I usually don't have enough time to read everything that I'm interested in. Need to triage a little bit for myself and pace myself. But there's lots of interesting information out there.
Great, thank you for this advice as well. So just another question about the future of use of AI. So we said there are so many possibilities, but many of them depend on the regulator as well. So if you could draw the next stages of 3 years, 5, maybe 10, what do you think what will happen in the industry throughout those years, and what will be the quickest to establish, and what is like, it's still maybe sci-fi, but we probably will get there quite soon?
Okay, so here is what I would probably change your timelines ever so slightly, because I don't think I don't feel confident making a prediction for 10 years because of the speed of how technology is moving at the moment. I
Yes.
think that a lot of predictions that go that far out will likely be wrong, because we cannot understand, and it's not trivial to figure out how these systems will amplify themselves and each other to create much quicker results, much quicker than we thought. So there's a graph that projects where general artificial intelligence, for example, would hit, and currently we're somewhere around 2027, where we potentially would have a artificial intelligence is considered general artificial intelligence that would be doing all the things, roughly speaking, probably better than untrained humans would in any field. And that then itself would then amplify again. But I think right now, what we can already do is use this notion of augmenting human productivity, effectiveness, human decision making, and leverage artificial intelligence and other cutting edge tools to help us do things better that we have already been doing. So that could be helping you to summarize, helping you to categorize, helping you to write things faster, brainstorm things, help you with root cause analysis. All those things are already possible now. I think in the future, in the next 1 to 2 years, I think what we'll see the technology deployed to solve problems that maybe were not previously solvable. So going into the direction of, hey, For example, unstructured data is always a topic that comes up in that realm, where you would then go and say, how can I take all these stacks of paper or all these unstructured documents and do something with it? And I think that that's something that we've seen technology being able to handle. I think that in 1 or 2 years, we will start seeing solutions, even in the life sciences, that will leverage that to do much more with data. And with that, we will be able to train better models to deliver even better outcomes. And from there, I suspect at some point in time, we'll get to an interface into our data that is completely different from how we interface with data now, which will be very conversational. So I'm almost envisioning a general chat agent or an AI that you can talk to virtually do anything that you're doing today just by having a conversation saying, I think we should be doing this, or I'm wondering what the situation looks like here and here in this context. And you will get the information. And from there, you can drill down and you can have a conversation and figure out what, and always have the guidance. I think you brought that up. So almost like an agent that can guide you and help you and support you, but also that you can interface with the data with and talk about anything that you want. I will probably put that at 5 years to be brave and dreamy that we will have something along those lines.
Yeah. So I can agree with you about that. So a while back, I listened to a podcast with a futurist, and he said that people are quite modest in the way technology is progresses, because it is quite logarithmic. And if we are looking at computers like 20 years ago, we are doing like trillion more computations per second, which is like incredible. And the way we can progress if we allow ourselves is astronomically higher than we think. And I think it connects with it as well. It's only to use it and not to be left behind, and behind the industry when we're talking about pharma manufacturing quality and so on, and try to be on pace. And hopefully the regulators can start helping with that as well, instead of hindering. And hopefully we slowly seeing that happening. Yeah.
And I also think, just to add to that, we often think, and I think the notion in the industry is that regulators are reluctant at best to implement or to support these. But oftentimes, when I'm having conversations with regulators or seeing what they're doing within their own four walls, then they're already playing with all these different things. They are hiring data scientists, training data scientists, deploying artificial intelligence models in-house to analyze data, and they're figuring things out for themselves. Now, they may not be willing to say, hey, here's a carte blanche, this is how you need to do your AI, but they're definitely already getting ready to be able to understand and inspect it, to getting ready to use it in-house for their advantage. And I think very open to go there. There's even the saying that it's almost like a moral imperative for life sciences companies to actually use cutting edge technology to better outcomes for patients. So we shouldn't be just waiting for regulators to say this is okay. I think they're on board with this is not going to go away and it's going to be part of our future, and we just need to figure out how together.
Great. Great, Fabrizio. So very fascinating talk. So before we wrap it up, is it something that we didn't touch and you feel it's important to share about digitalization, AI, that we left out?
I mean, we could probably talk for another 2 or 3 hours without exhausting all the different avenues and topics we can touch on. But I think that this was a great first start and a great first conversation.
Great. Thank you, Fabrizio. So, to the audience, everybody who's listening, make sure to follow Fabrizio Maniglio on LinkedIn. He shares fascinating information about AI, and also quite very interesting images that are AI generated to follow his posts. Very interesting, fascinating. And of course, probably will see him on more of our webinars, so stay tuned on that, hopefully. And on that note, Fabrizio, thank you very much for joining me today, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening in.